What's up, fight fans from all around the world? Welcome back to the WAAR Room. I am your fight goddess, Chris Baldwin, and I'm here in the WAAR Room with my fight family, Mr. Eddie Goldman. We call him the conscious of combat sports, and my girl, Malissa Smith. She is a women's boxing historian. Guys, we are going to kick off this show with the great comeback by Patricio Manuel last night in Long Beach. That's where the fight was, in Long Beach on the Golden Boy card. Patricio, he dominated his opponent, I thought. And were you able to watch the fight, Melissa? You guys able to watch that fight at all?
I wasn't able to watch it, but I am going to definitely catch it this afternoon because I hear it was a great bout and it was hard at the end of the day. Look,
Pat knocked old boy out, not out, but down in the first round. So Pat was looking pretty strong. I thought Pat chased his opponent around the ring. So that was the only thing. Like, you needed to cut the ring off, but he looked good after 4 years, after a 4-year layoff. So it was a great, to me, like for the LGBTQ community to have a trans man in there dominating and winning his fight. That was just amazing. So what do you guys want to talk about today?
Well, I just want to add on to that a little bit because, WBC made an announcement that they were looking to have a sort of a trans league, if you will, or have trans people fight trans people as some kind of separation. And Patricio Manuel, he wrote on Instagram that he was disappointed, that he felt it was dehumanizing. And, went on to say that when he walks into a gym, he's treated no differently than any other man in all aspects of his training. And that at a time of rising discrimination against transgender people, he's grateful to have received nothing but support and camaraderie from these boxers and their coaches who have, seen and respected him as the man he is. So I think it's important for us to understand where he's coming from as he comes into the ring. That, he is a man, and that's who he is, how he feels, and how he is approaching his career in boxing, and hopefully we will see him again.
Absolutely.
And this fight, by the way, while the WBC and really a lot of the federations in the IOC are taking this inhuman, discriminatory position to trans athletes, this fight was sanctioned by the California State Athletic Commission. The whole card was on Saturday night. So it wasn't like they were just fighting in a backyard somewhere. This is a professional sanctioned fight regulated by one of the largest commissions in the United States.
And Pat has been fighting a long time for the California Commission has seen Pat as an amateur. So it's not like, Pat just came out of the woodwork. So Pat's proven himself, and he deserves this opportunity just like any other amateur turned pro. And now he's 2-0. So great job, Pat. Let's go, Pat. Right on. So Eddie, look, we're going to touch base on talk about this little wrestling incident. I'm not a big fan of wrestling, but Aaron Brooks. Can we talk about Aaron Brooks? Who is he, and why is he down talking about Muslims and other faiths?
Here's the thing that's happened in college wrestling. Saturday night also were the largest event in American wrestling, the NCAA Division I Wrestling Championships. The finals were live on ESPN, and we'll wait a few days to get the ratings, but usually they've been getting in the 600,000-700,000 range, more than Showtime Boxing has been getting, and really more than DAZN, which doesn't release its ratings, have been getting. And Aaron Brooks is a wrestler, a very successful wrestler for Penn State. Saturday night, he won his third NCAA title, one of only a handful of wrestlers to win 3 titles, and he has another year of eligibility left at 184 pounds. So what they do on ESPN is after the wrestlers win, they do a brief live interview with them on ESPN, and then they go in the media room and all that. But normally what's supposed to happen is that after they do the ESPN interview, they go straight to the media room and do an interview with the media there, and then they'll go back, and if they have to do any drug test or anything like that. Well, a couple of things happened. First of all, right after at Matt's side, he was interviewed. The interviewer, Quint Kesnich of ESPN, who, by the way, went to the same high school that I did, although he was there many years later, asked him, instead of talking about the match, because Brooks, although he's a two-time champion, was ranked number 3 because he had lost during the regular season. So a very competitive weight class. Instead of getting right into the match and the usual sports stuff, he asked them about, he beat the number 1 Kyson of Northern Iowa. Instead of getting into that, he tells us, tell us about your faith right away, getting into religion. And Brooks goes into this rant about the Holy Spirit, and that's why he won. And, not that he's a great wrestler, has great coaches and trains his butt off, but the Holy Spirit. And then he says he's just for the Holy Spirit. And he says something like, no Muhammad, no one else, and he just insults Muslims. And basically turns what should be a secular event is more than just saying he thanks God, which a lot of people do, and I think is going too far anyway, but is not necessarily a big deal. He goes in and he insults Muslims and he insults everybody else that basically isn't a fundamentalist Christian, whatever type of Christian that he is, that he identifies himself as. And so our friend Umar Lee, who we hope to have on the show soon, was in Tulsa. Umar's a guy that's covered boxing and wrestling and combat sports for a long period of time. Umar was there and is very pissed off about this. So after the tournament was over, he went up to Aaron Brooks and had a big heated discussion with him. Why do you have to insult Muslims? And he was not only, by the way he said it, insulting Muslims, he was insulting Jews, he was insulting non-believers, Roman Catholics, anybody else, and including Mormons. And his coach and assistant coach, the Sandersons, come from Utah, from that background. So why do you get into this? Why do you want to make a religious cultural war when you're talking about how you won a wrestling match like this? In addition, and this, by the way, was not just Brooks just sort of being unhinged. There was a video of this, was retweeted by a number of people on Twitter, including the official account of NCAA wrestling. The official account of NCAA Division I wrestling retweeted this, saying Aaron Brooks talking about his faith, and put this up on Twitter, this very divisive and offensive remark. In addition, at the event, Trump showed up. And this earlier in the day, he had put this crazy comment on his crazy social network site, protest, saying he's going to be arrested on Tuesday because of all the crimes that they've been investigating in New York. Now, it's unclear whether he's going to be arrested Tuesday or not. And in fact, if anything, if he says it, tend to doubt it. But he's basically calling on all of his maggots to have like another mini January 6th,
right?
An insurrection, and to attack the Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, who's a guy that I voted for in both the primary and the general election, and who's, as I said, the DA in New York County in Manhattan, and protest. And when he says protest, we know what kind of protest that he wants. So Trump was there, and he was brought into the arena early in the tournament by another pro-insurrectionist, Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, the multimillionaire senator from Oklahoma, who recently got called out in hearings because anti-union guy, they're trying to harass the union. So they called in the Teamsters to testify, and the Teamsters president O'Brien made a monkey of Mullen. You could find that on Twitter also if you look at the Teamsters site. Who we follow each other, actually, me and the Teamsters, although I've never been a member of the Teamsters. So anyway, Trump was there, and he got some applause and people that were against him, there was some boos, but I think they felt intimidated because they didn't come there for a political rally. They came there to watch the pinnacle of American college wrestling, and some of the great wrestlers, and a number of them are going to go on to become Olympians and Olympic champions and medalists. So they were there for the great sport of wrestling. So what they, in addition, what they did when the wrestlers would win, as I said, they do the ESPN interview and then they start to go to the back. But they were then directed to go to speak to Trump. For example,
my word.
And take pictures with them and shake his hands. For example, Andrew Alirez, who at 141 upset Leo Woods, Andrew Alirez of Northern Colorado, winning his first title in a really, really exciting match. He does his interview. He starts to go to the back and he passes by Trump, and they bring him back to meet with Trump. And there were pictures. The Des Moines Register in Iowa had a whole pictorial of Trump meeting all these wrestlers. Mason Paris, who won at heavyweight, Keegan O'Toole, who won his second title, Missouri wrestler, and a number of others. So what they did is they turned this thing into, as Umar wrote on Twitter and debated people, they turned in what should be the world's oldest sport that's been practiced for millennia, that goes back at least to ancient Egypt. Really wrestling really predates the development of humans. You see animals wrestling, but as an organized sport, it's existed for thousands of years, virtually everywhere in the world, under every culture, under every political system. They want to basically make it an adjunct of the MAGA and Christian nationalist culture, and they turn in the highest profile wrestling event each year in America into this. Now, interestingly, on the ESPN telecast, because I wasn't at this event, I was watching on ESPN, they didn't mention that Trump was there until the very end. One of the announcers just sort of mentioned in passing that how great an event this is, it's sold out and all that stuff, and how we have a former president here, but they didn't say who. So, and I don't know whether ESPN mentioned this on SportsCenter afterwards because they didn't watch that.
Well, it wasn't Obama.
Well, it wasn't him, and also it hadn't necessarily been a plan for him to attend.
Yes, it was a plan. Yes, it was a plan.
It's a photo op.
He was brought in there. He didn't just show up. He was brought in there by the governor Stitt of Oklahoma and Senator Mullen of Oklahoma. He was ushered in to the whole thing and given all the prominence by the NCAA to have all the wrestlers speak to him and get the photo ops of him and the wrestlers. So this is important. And the ESPN on their website, they had all they did, interestingly enough, even though it was broadcast live on ESPN, and ESPN networks had the entire, all 6 sessions of the tournament, all I found on the ESPN website was an AP story. And the AP story focused on the wrestling aspect, how Yanni Diakomahalis won his 4th title, although they did mention that Trump was there and got applause, but they didn't really go into it in depth. The main focus of the story was to recap the wrestling from the sports angle that went on.
Gotcha.
So now I wish an atheist athlete would just sue the NCAA for that.
Well, that's it. And where is their response? Nothing.
Right.
There is no response
like
from
somebody
NCAA
should sue
wrestling.
Them. Right.
And they need to do that. They are the institution responsible for this, and they have nothing. Absolutely nothing.
They retweeted all this stuff. They didn't only disavowed it, they promoted it.
And, there's still nothing as of when we are doing taping on this on Sunday afternoon, New York time, the morning in Pacific time, and there's nothing out there. And that's a disgrace.
There
They
has only
really
been
need to come out there and say, hey, Aaron has his views. They do not reflect this. We encourage all faiths, yada, yada, yada. They need to do that.
yes, and they have to train these people.
How
You
to
don't see
speak.
too much of this in professional sports. If you see something like this, professional sports, the athlete will probably be suspended for coming out for doing something like this, whatever their private views might be. So it's very bad. And the
Very
other
bad
thing
taste.
is the homophobia that exists in there. To my knowledge, there's only been one openly gay NCAA Division I wrestler. When Mike Fusillo, then of Ohio State, won an NCAA title in 2008, but he didn't come out till many years later because he felt that he really didn't. And he said his coach knew. I think Tom Ryan was still coaching then. His teammates knew. It wasn't like it was a big secret, but he couldn't openly do that. Now, that was 15 years ago in 2008. Now, again, I don't know if there might be some wrestlers on lower levels, but I haven't read about it in terms of men's wrestling. In women's wrestling, there've been, a number of openly women, lesbian or bi wrestlers that have come out. But in men's wrestling, no. And it's that whole MAGA mentality that's really dominant. And this is supposed to be sport for all, for everybody. And they have this authoritarian view and this theocratic view of we got to shove this stuff down your throats.
And especially, again, these are college athletes. They're coming up out of high school systems. And this is NCAA wrestling. This isn't, hey, let's just have a few people have a wrestling match. This is the wrestling match of the year where, you're crowning the folks who are the national champions. So it's really completely unacceptable that this institution, the NCAA, has not come out and made a very clear statement in support of their athletes of all faiths, and so on. I mean, it's just unacceptable.
Yeah, and they're not going to, I really doubt that they're going to do that.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
it's very unfortunate.
Nope. They want those Republican dollars flowing in.
Well, yeah, I guess, they want the alumni or whatever that support these teams at the various colleges, but the colleges should also be, what about the University of Pennsylvania, which this athlete represents on this big stage? What about the members of his team that may be of other faiths? What is that? Where are his coaches? Where is his institution to say, no, we're very happy that you won, but no, you may not say this. This is not acceptable. Where are the grown-ups in the room here?
Exactly.
And the other students, Umar pointed this out, there are Muslims. Penn State's a huge school. There are Muslim students, Jewish students, a lot of non-believers, because non-believers are probably the plurality among young people, among college-age people. There are all these different people. So they're going to Penn State to get an education, to learn those skills and whatever they're focusing on, and practicing their sports. And it's a big sports school too, as well. They've had, I think, the last 10 out of 12 years, Penn State has won the team title in D1 wrestling, and we know they're a big football power and all this. So fine, you go to Penn State for all those, and the other state schools for all those reasons that we know of. But it's for everybody. It's a state school. They can't discriminate on religion. It's not a religious private school. It's a state school. So they have their requirements, in terms of residency and academic performance and all that type of stuff that every college does. But they can't discriminate and say you can come and you can't come based on whatever your religious beliefs are or aren't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And the same thing with political beliefs too. And the fact that what they've done is they've politicized the sport of wrestling. This is something going on since Trump took office in the last couple of years, because I haven't been as immersed for many years. I was really immersed in the wrestling community. And I knew some of the politics of these people, but they knew my politics. But we focused on the wrestling, we focused on the sport, and we were able to work together what we felt for the betterment of the sport. But they're not interested in the betterment of the sport, which is a struggling sport, which is especially what's going on in college athletics today, which is facing a financial axe. Yesterday, for example, on Saturday night when this was going on, I followed the trending on Twitter because we still got to be on it because a lot of people are on it despite the nonsense that Musk is up to. And I did not see what was going on in the NCAAs. Again, live on ESPN, trending on Twitter in the top 30 in the U.S. Why? You had the World Baseball Classic, U.S. versus Venezuela, a seesaw game on Fox. You had a UFC brawl that was going on. You had all the college basketball tournaments, including a number of upsets that were going on in various networks. So it's getting crowded out. And people have been saying this for decades. Why are the biggest event in college wrestling the same time as the March Madness basketball? It's not, it's an indoor sport, so you're not as tied to the seasons as you might be for other sports. And a lot of people say, yeah, we got to change it, and it never gets changed. And so it gets messed up. So again, we'll find out during the week what the ratings were, but this is a sport that's basically almost on life support. And it's also a sport that is some of the most misogynist stuff too, because for years they resisted women's wrestling. There were like girls high school wrestlers back in the day who had to go to court. Some of this sounds like what happened in boxing. They had to go to court to be allowed to wrestle on the men's team, because there were no women's teams then, or the boys team, actually, what it was for high school. And so finally, women's wrestling began to be developed at an international level. And in 2004, it became an Olympic sport. And Japan has been the dominant country in that. The U.S. has had some good wrestlers too, along with some other countries. Now, this is 19 years ago. Why is it only now that we're starting to see women's wrestling developed as an NCAA sport? It'll only be starting next season. There have been independent and smaller groups. There have been like dozens of them on different levels of women's college wrestling, but it's been resisted by the misogynists who run.
I guess they never heard of Title IX.
Right.
They
Yeah.
blame-
How
that's
many
the
women
thing.
are trying to wrestle?
I don't get it.
These people blame Title IX for the big decline where hundreds of wrestling programs were lost from the 1970s on. You know where they were lost? Because they didn't make their programs popular. They didn't market them. They dealt with them narrowly. I had battles and arguments for years, and so as did other people, about marketing and promoting the sport. And they refused to do it because a lot of the men would say, oh, the women are going to take our place. Kind of, nonsense. Rather than, as we've seen in every other sport, it enhances this. It enhances the sport. It brings in new athletes and new fans to the entire sport, and it lifts the whole sport up. But today, we're gonna next wrestling season, University of Iowa should have the first Division I women's wrestling team. But why is it taking all this time? Well, all these other sports have come in, all these other developments in media, streaming, the internet, and all this other stuff have come along to surpass any potential that college wrestling could have.
Yeah, I just don't
Yeah.
think there's a whole lot of women trying to wrestle. I mean, when you think of sport,
yes, there are.
well, I mean, I'm just saying you need quite a few women to get a national development program together, or a collegiate program together. So I don't know.
if the big colleges start offering these programs and offering scholarships, you're going to see more women do it
Yeah.
coming out of high school, because there are women. Some states have in high school have women's championships, and some places the women just wrestle the men on the high school team.
Well,
Right.
yeah, you do have teams that have it in wrestling in high school and in middle school. You have girls, basically teams, mixed gender teams, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's just come about what in the last 10 years or so, right?
No, it's been going on for a couple of decades.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, wrestling is, look, it's a we think of it as a niche sport, but it's a really important sport, and the fact that it's hijacked in this way is really shameful, and it's sort of like bad on all of us to have allowed this. Bad on us to allow universities to use this as an excuse, to use Title IX as an excuse, rather than leaning in and saying, yeah, wrestling is a great sport. Let's make sure we have facilities for men and women to compete and allow them the opportunity to grow and to become Olympians and all the rest. They're just walking away from it. And that's shameful, again, on us.
But there's been a fight. I've been involved in this for a long time. There's been a fight in the wrestling community for years.
Yeah.
But the people who are dominant are these maggots, are these people. And that's why you see college sports all over the United States. There is no really successful team in New York City. There are a couple of lower level teams. There are none in Chicago. There are none in Atlanta. There are none in Houston. There are none in Dallas. There's one in Philadelphia that doesn't do very well. There are none in Los Angeles. I just wrote about this. All the big media markets that are out there do not have a successful top 10 college wrestling team. So schools like UCLA used to have wrestling, got rid of it. Even CCNY, Brooklyn College in New York, used to have wrestling. They got rid of it. And it's become much more in the right-wing suburbs and small towns, which is disgraceful because, again, as I said, it's everywhere. Everyone is wrestling. And the ones who do decent in high school, some of the wrestlers even won, like Carter Starachi, who also won in his post-match interview. He won also his third title, and he has another year or so of eligibility left. He won at 174, undefeated this year. He said he wants to go to MMA. He says he wants to win Olympic gold, but he wants to go to MMA. And he said he's seen with Bo Nickel, another former Penn State wrestler, and he said this is going to be easy for him compared to wrestling. So that's where they're going to go. And for the women that do well on a high school or even college level, they're going to go right to MMA because that's where they can
exactly.
No, absolutely.
Making money.
Yeah, that's the trajectory. Well, all
right. Well, look, folks, anything else you want to touch on, Eddie?
Yeah, we got to briefly mention. I know we want to do more of a whole show on this. What's going on internationally with the politicization of the Olympic movement, and particularly with Olympic level boxing. But there was in a way a game changer about this debate about what to do with Russians in the Olympics, because the IOC is pushing to have them as, quote, neutrals, which is just a sham and a fig leaf, because everybody's going to know they're Russians. Well, this past week, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Putin and also Maria Lvova, the Commissioner for Children's Rights in Russia. And they said that he's allegedly, they have to put allegedly, responsible for the war crime of unlawful deportation of population children, and that of unlawful transfer of population children from occupied areas of Ukraine to the Russian Federations. And
Wow.
and this is on a very large scale. So they put out this arrest warrant for Putin, and they're just thumbing their nose at it. So we now have like a situation where the IOC, he's wanted as a criminal. And this is the country that the IOC is trying to bring back to the Olympics. And some of the federations are already bringing them back, the IBA bringing them back, and the Fencing Federation already brought them back. And that's causing cancellation in Europe of many fencing events. It's an Olympic sport for a long time, and Bach was a fencer, because these countries will not allow in, they will not give visas to people from Russia and Belarus. So there's a whole blowback going on. There is actually a demonstration next Saturday, March 25th, and I don't know much about this group called Free Ukraine, but you could look them up. They're on Facebook, and they have a website, freeukraine.ch. They're based in Geneva, Switzerland, where they're going to be called No to Neutral Athletes from Russia and Belarus at Olympics 2024 in Paris, boycott Russian sport. They'll be marching in Lausanne to the IOC, demanding that, again, that no Russians be and no athletes from Belarus allowed, even as supposed neutrals. So I don't know a lot about this group. It's an NGO, and I don't know how big this demonstration is going to be. But I think it's really something to watch, because there's a whole schism developing in the Olympic movement. The Canadian group of Canadian athletes recently put out a statement to the IOC saying, we don't want the Russians and Belarusians there, including the spokesperson Becky Scott, a former member of the IOC and herself an Olympic champion. And they opposed what the Canadian Olympic Committee said of, oh, we'll have them there as neutrals, that farce, that charade, that pantomime of having them there as neutrals. So
Right.
this is going to a head. And then the other thing at the IBA Women's Championships going on in India, they invited Matitsin, the Russian sports minister there, even though the IOC said no Russian officials at these events. He was there, and they gave full reign to the Russians and Belarusians under their own flag, and not even pretending for them to be neutrals. But when it came to other countries that Russia doesn't like, they didn't let the athlete from Kosovo in. Kosovo is a country that seceded from Serbia a number of years ago. They're part of the Kosovo Olympic Committee, part of the IOC for, I think, since 2014 or so, or maybe before. The Kosovo Boxing Federation's been part of AIBA and then IBA. They're a fully sanctioned boxing federation. So they have a right to show up there. But India first wouldn't let the athlete come in from Kosovo. And then they said, oh, you could be there, but with no flag. So they're letting the Russians in there, with flag and full accreditation, but not the athlete from Kosovo. And then the athlete from Netherlands showed up. While the Netherlands Boxing Federation is boycotting the event, they let athletes go. So one of the boxers showed up, and they said, well, you can fight, but not under you, again, as a neutral athlete, not under your own colors. So this is a double standard. It's just naked. It's really obvious the stuff that's going on. And there's a big battle. And supposedly later in the year, the boxing federations that are opposed to the Russian-led and Russian-financed IBA and Kremlin want to be organizing their own international tournament. We'll see that. And the IOC is organizing the Olympic qualification events this year for Paris 2024. But there's also another sort of fly in the ointment. All this crap was going on in India. And in October, the next IOC session, where they're supposed to finalize what happens with the IBA, what happens with the program at 24 and 28 with boxing, is going to be in India. So all this is going to a head, and the suspicion is that Bach is going to completely cave in to Russia. So
Well, he's already caved in. That means completely caved in. He's, we might as well call that a cave in if you're going to allow Russian and Belarusian athletes to compete in the qualifiers. I mean, that's just right. I mean, why even pretend any other way?
It's pretending to keep some legitimacy.
Yeah.
So many athletes around the world are against this, and whether or not there's a boycott of the Paris Olympics, we'll see what happens. But this is just heading to a big split. And of course, at the same time, the Russians are organizing the games under the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that I've talked about for a while, where you'd have Russia, China, and a number of other countries, organizing their own sporting events and competition.
Sure. So, but we're going to get into this more deeply in a separate show.
Yeah.
We're looking to put together a panel to really explore
to break that down. Right.
I'm just pissed about all this. I just
Well, we know, Eddie, we know, but we can unpack all of that in our next show dedicated to this. We'll have an IOC roundtable discussion. And so until then, anything else you want to talk about, Melissa, before we get out of here? Tell the people where they can find you.
Sure.
Tell the people where they can find you.
They can find me. I am at Girl Boxing Now. I am on Instagram. I am on Twitter because, that's where boxing lives. Now, I'm also really trying to make a stab on Spoutable and trying to get people to say things about boxing. Every day I put on a post for Women's History Month, and I am really focusing on women's boxing, putting it out there across these platforms. So please just give it a like, give it a retweet so we can push the idea that women really have been boxing for a long time. I'm the author of The History of Women's Boxing, and I'm at work on my next book tentatively titled The Promise of Women Boxing.
Right on. All right, Eddie, tell the people where they can find you, baby.
Well, I'm still on Twitter for now, and on Spoutable at NHB News, both places. And you could find my Patreon at patreon.com/Eddie Goldman, and going to be doing hopefully get some other writing assignments and other things going on that are in the works in the next few weeks, and trying to cover these things and also the chaos and the insanity in the heavyweight division, where we still don't have a date for Fury and Usyk, and who knows if that'll ever take place. And there are a number of heavyweight fights coming up, so I'm trying to focus on that. So I'm dealing with all these and still watching the World Baseball Classic too, which has its own political angle to it too. There's our own opposition from the maggots to it as well.
Right on. Well, thank you guys for hopping in the War Room today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. You guys hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter at Angry Afro Radio, because I am that angry Black woman. And I'm on Instagram at Fight Goddess Fitness. You guys check us out next time. Until then, peace, love, and push-ups. Boom.